everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Drop Your Noise. My name is Kirti. I'm the host of the show. I invite individuals from around the world to share their personal experience, their insights, and even some of their thoughts around or knowledge around current affairs or current trends. Speaking of which, I'd like to share with you this month about AI and the power of storytelling. Before I dive in a little deeper, let me start off with this. A couple of weeks ago, I gave a workshop at the Netherlands Business Council in Dubai. It was on the calmness, communication, and the confidence in the age of AI. I had prepared slides, and then I asked them, what is it that you want out of this workshop? Because then maybe those slides were not going to be important, right? It turns out something much more interesting came to the surface, which was how much is the power of our wisdom going to be relevant with AI? And also, this idea that we're becoming AI dependent because it sounds so good, but still something inside of us is missing. There's just like this doubt and this niggling something inside of us. So we unpacked it during that workshop. I shared with them one surprise article that came to surface for me just a couple of hours before I was giving this workshop. And it was by the Harvard Business Review. Back in 2024, the reasons we were using AI or generative AI was to generate ideas. Today, it's being used as a way for therapy, for organizing, and for helping us with relationships. To some degree, I can see some benefits to this, but if you're becoming dependent on something, I'm wondering what will happen to our inner discernment, our inner way of processing, and also our trust inside of us. And to me, that was showing up in this workshop. I want to share another story with you, why it's been much on my mind. I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across a comment of a parent. Now, this parent shared that her 8-year-old daughter turned to ChatGPT to ask it some questions about something personal. It turns out in the output, ChatGPT's response was to tell her she's incomplete, and that was playing havoc on her behavior. She was 8 years old. The post was, how do we feel about AI entering into the curriculum? I know AI is here to stay, but that output had such an effect on an 8-year-old. And if you are a woman who has gone through so much in life, every woman that I've met has one story or the other where till today they're struggling against the conditions and the limitations and the comments that come their way, that AI is still picking up on this. To me, that is worrying. On the other hand, I am no different than anyone else. I use AI tremendously, especially for this podcast. It does speed up things and it does make life more efficient. But if we choose efficiency over thinking things through, then we are still not having to stop and pause to see what can happen in the long term by not putting in some boundaries or some lines so that we can still support and grow our humanity. And for me, I think I lean back into this thing of storytelling. When I first started Drop Your Noise podcast, it was by accident. I had interviewed an impressionable person who I had known when they were 8 years old. The way this person shared their story was so inspiring. I had to publish it, or at least something inside me said, you had to publish this. And since then, I've always looked for the stories that offer us a diversity of thought. because for me, that is humanity. It's not about perfect, it's not about black or white. There is no such thing. In fact, it's in the nuances that we learn so much about each other's mistakes, failures, resilience, our motivations, our growth, our culture. It's all in those little stories that I feel that an AI cannot ever pick up. In the way we tell our story with the tone of voice, the silences, everything. Communication is one of our richest, greatest gifts that we have, but it can also be our vice when we are feeling alone and anxious and concerned how the world is perceiving us. And because we have so much available to us, and because we are so worried about how people see us and perceive us, we still live in internally trying to hide away all these very things that make us human. We hide it because we cannot still deal with guilt, with shame, and we are always worried about how people perceive us. But these are the very stories that has shaped us going forward. Now, legacy is something that I would sneeze upon for a long time. Yes, I was a snob. I was like, well, that's very egotistical. Why should somebody keep telling their stories? But in the world that we live in today, I think those are going to be the really necessary stories we will need to have to support the generations to come to shape their destiny. Remember those days whenever something happened to you when you were growing up and an elder would come and sit with you and talk to you and will always share something in kind of a story. They will tell you about maybe their lives or something they heard or about somebody else because they wanted to get their point across and to give us hope or inspiration or motivation. That's the power of a story. That's the power of our legacy. And I know that those are the kinds of stories that take me forward in my life. I still remember the story my mother just recently imparted with me about my grandmothers who sat down and had tea together, didn't speak a word of English, but had a lot in common. It's a much more complex story than that for another day. But that story shaped me going forward that we may not speak the same language, but we always find something in common. These are the things I don't think AI is going to be able to be useful in. Granted, AI is accelerating. AI is doing a lot of cognitive intelligence. But given to what happened to that 8-year-old daughter, I'm not so sure that we should start using it for therapy and organizing our lives because we take away the very things that we need that makes us human. Learning to trust ourselves. And the way we trust ourselves is by going through our lived experiences. I am not going to say that it's not easy to use AI. Believe me, I've been bullied in my life, I've been rejected in my life, and I've had abandonment in my life. I can tell you lots of stories about those. And so it is easy to sit very alone with yourself and ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Why me? How can I make this better? How can I fit in? What would people think of me because I'm saying this? And I could see the temptation to using AI for my solutions. But I also know that if I do that, I'm always going to be in some kind of paralysis to take action. And I struggle with that, believe me, a lot of the times, because I'm always worried about what people are going to think about me or say about me. I have that a lot with social media. There, I've come out and said it. But I do know that because I have the paralysis, even more so, I cannot depend on AI, so I have to take actions. But I'm at an age where I can do this. But when you're at a very, very young age, such as 8 or 9, what happens then can determine the child's future. And so I do feel that we need to be better storytellers from different generations, all generations. We need to be better storytellers because we support one another rather than wanting to be perfect in front of one another, is to develop our sense of compassion by sharing our stories even more, by seeing the value of it, not to change people, but to support them. And that's a very different narrative. A lot of people also love to give advice because they think their advice is the right advice. People also give advice because they want to make sure somebody else out there is not going to struggle so much. They come from a good place. But the way we frame things nowadays, if we don't frame it without much care how that person's going to take the message or where they are at, it can make them feel more lonely. So, what AI has actually shared with me is that it's pushing us or nudging us, much better said, it's nudging us to be more aware of how we can communicate with one another. It's making us more aware to be more compassionate, take more care about when emotions are running high and low, how to read up on them. Because when we can do that, we can navigate the way we tell our stories and how to tell our stories, not for right or wrong, but to support one another, to be able to bring the best versions of ourselves, the versions we want to share with others out, and not feel like we have to hide it and cover it up or judge it. Because often the very best of us lies in the shell of all the mistakes and failures. We need to go through mistakes and failures and cut them out just to see the beauty of who we truly are. So this month, having said all that, this month I want to share with you two wonderful guests who are going to be talking about storytelling. One guest has done tremendous amount of work on well-being in the South Asian community. She even has her own podcast. She's very creative and a beautiful artist in her own way. And finally, my other guest, who I spoke to her months ago, nothing to do with AI, shares how she wrote her book that has been published recently. And it's all to do with her parents' legacies and their stories and their insights and her take on it. And it's not a true story, but it's a fiction. I mean, that's creativity. Beautiful. I look forward to sharing these stories with you. And I would always love to hear what you're willing to hear more about. What do we need to drop our noise about or become friends with our minds with? Do let me know. Have a good one.